The Manhattan night glittered like 1,000 diamonds thrown across the sky, each light reflecting off the hood of the Maybach as it slid down Park Avenue with effortless arrogance. Inside, billionaire tech mogul Vance Callahan leaned back in the leather seat, one hand resting lazily on the thigh of his mistress, Lila Crane. She laughed softly, brushing her hair behind her ear, already imagining the headline she'd write tomorrow about the private side of the city's most untouchable CEO. But then the light at Columbus Circle flicked red, the Maybach slowed, and Vance's entire world slammed to a halt. Because there, right there in the crosswalk, stood a woman he thought he had buried in the ashes of his past. Maddie Rowan, his ex-wife. Her hair was pulled into a loose knot, her coat too thin for the February cold, her face pale under the streetlights. But what froze Vance wasn't her. It wasn't the way she held herself with quiet strength, despite the weight of exhaustion. It was the two toddlers clutching her hands. Twins. A boy and a girl, no more than 2 years old, bundled in mismatched winter jackets. The little boy turned his head just enough for the streetlight to catch his cheek. A dimple, the same one Vance saw in the mirror every morning. His heart lurched violently, an emotion he had not felt in years, something dangerously close to fear. His fingers tightened against the steering wheel, air stalled in his lungs. "No way," he whispered. Lila looked up. "What? Do you know her?" But Vance didn't answer. He couldn't, because the girl, her curls bouncing with every step, lifted her face, and her eyes, impossibly bright under the city glow, were Vance's exact shade of storm gray. The blood drained from his face. He had spent years building an empire, crushing rivals, controlling narratives, rewriting his past like a polished press release. But nothing, no boardroom ambush, no corporate betrayal, had ever undone him like this single moment. Maddie glanced toward the Maybach. Their eyes met. Her breath caught in her chest. He could see it. But she didn't hesitate. She didn't stop. She simply tightened her grip on the twins and walked faster, as if Manhattan itself were a battlefield, and she had learned long ago to run before the bombs fell. Vance shoved his door open, instinct overriding logic. Lila grabbed his arm. "Vance, what are you doing?" He didn't answer, because suddenly, heartbreakingly, devastatingly, he wasn't sure if he was watching his ex-wife or the future he never knew he had just slipped through traffic and disappear. And he couldn't let that happen. Not again. He stepped into the street. The cold smell of antiseptic still lived somewhere in Maddie's memory, tucked between the places where love used to be and the places where pain decided to stay forever. 2 years before the crosswalk, she had been lying in a hospital recovery room, barely awake, barely breathing, after her final IVF procedure. Machines hummed softly around her, casting a sterile glow on the walls. She remembered gripping the thin blanket, whispering a prayer that this time, maybe, life would finally give her a chance. Vance had promised he'd be there. He had promised he'd hold her hand when she woke up. Instead, the first thing she saw was the empty chair beside her bed. The second thing she saw was a message from him blinking on her phone. "This isn't working anymore. I can't keep living in emotional chaos. I'm done." No explanation. No goodbye. Just a clean corporate exit, like she was nothing more than a failed investment. Her chest tightened at the memory. She had tried calling him, once, twice, 10 times, until her voice dissolved into a whisper no one heard. A nurse eventually placed a hand on her shoulder and asked gently, "Is there someone we can call for you, honey?" Maddie shook her head. Shame weighed too much to let her speak. The next morning, Vance's assistant emailed her a termination notice from the pharmaceutical company where she worked. A fabricated accusation, mishandling confidential files, A reason no one questioned, because everyone knew Vance's reach. Within hours, security escorted her out of the building. Her keycard blinked red. Colleagues avoided her eyes. She was erased in real time. That week, Maddie moved into a cheap studio in New Jersey, surrounded by cardboard boxes, only the glow of her old MacBook lighting the room. She cried until the grief dried into something sharper. But then, 2 pink lines. A miracle she never expected. A miracle Vance would never know existed. Her hands trembled around the test, and for the first time in months, hope cracked through the darkness. But hope came with fear. Fear that if Vance discovered the babies, he would destroy what little life she had left. So she ran. Quietly. Completely. Now, standing in Manhattan again, watching him step out of the Maybach, memories collided with the present like a punch to the lungs. Because if Vance had seen the twins tonight, there was no telling what a man like him would do next. Inside the Maybach, Lila Crane watched Vance with growing suspicion. His pupils had blown wide, his breath stalled in his chest, and his hand hovered uselessly over the car door as if his entire nervous system had suddenly forgotten how to function. She had seen powerful men panic, but never like this. Never over a woman crossing the street with toddlers. "Vance," she said carefully, soft but edged, "why are you acting like you've seen a ghost?" He didn't answer. His eyes stayed glued to Maddie and the twins, as though a single blink would erase them forever. Lila followed his gaze, studying Maddie's posture, her worn coat, the quiet struggle in the way she held the children close. She didn't scream money, power, or influence, but something about the way Vance reacted to her made Lila's journalist instincts ignite. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't nostalgia. This was fear. And fear, Lila knew from years of chasing corporate scandals, always pointed to a secret worth millions. The car rolled forward slightly as the light changed, but Vance didn't sit back. His entire body leaned out the open door, torn between chasing the past and hiding from it. Lila's stomach knotted. If Maddie was the source of the tension she sensed building in Vance for months, then Lila had just stumbled onto the story of her career. She wet her lips, choosing her words. "You never told me you were married." Vance's jaw flexed. It wasn't relevant. "Really?" she murmured. "Because it looks relevant now." He shot her a warning glare, sharp enough to slice through steel. But Lila didn't flinch. She had danced with egos bigger than his and walked away with headlines. She could handle him. But what she couldn't handle was losing her leverage. If Maddie had given birth to twins, and if those children were connected to Vance, then everything changed. Lila hadn't invested months seducing the walls around him just to watch another woman become the axis of his future. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper, dripping with calculation. "She didn't look surprised to see you, Vance, almost like she was expecting this day." For the first time, Vance's mask cracked. His voice came out low. "I need to talk to her." Lila smiled, slow, knowing, venomous. Of course he did. Because even billionaires weren't immune to ghosts rising from the dead. But as he stepped out of the car, Lila made a silent promise to herself. If Maddie Rowan was the key to Vance's downfall, Lila would make sure she turned it. The cold February wind sliced through Maddie Rowan's coat as she hurried across Columbus Circle, her grip tightening around the small hands of the twins. The city roared around her, honking taxis, tourist chatter, the distant hum of subway rails. But all she could hear was her own heartbeat, drumming against her ribs like a warning siren. She hadn't seen Vance in almost 3 years. She had trained herself not to imagine this moment, not to replay it in her mind, not to fear it. But fear, she learned, has a way of living in the cracks of a person. Quiet, patient, waiting. And when she saw the Maybach door open, and Vance Callahan stepping out into the street, fear came back like a tidal wave. "Come on, babies," she whispered, urging the twins forward. Her voice trembled despite her efforts to sound steady. "Hold Mommy's hands tight." Noah, the little boy, looked up at her with sleepy gray eyes, Vance's eyes, and she felt the familiar sting hit the back of her throat. Eden, the girl, clutched Maddie's sleeve, sensing tension even without understanding it. The twins always sensed things. They had lived inside her through months of heartbreak. They knew their mother's storms. Maddie felt Vance's presence before she fully turned her head. The way the air shifted, the way the traffic seemed to dull, the way her chest constricted. She didn't want to face him. Not now. Not like this. Exhausted, underdressed, juggling 2 toddlers and 2 jobs. Surviving each month by stitching hope and fear together like mismatched fabric. What would he think? That she looked tired? That she never lived up to his image? That the babies were proof she'd moved on? He would be wrong about all of it. Maddie hadn't moved on. She'd rebuilt. Painfully. Quietly. Without applause. And the babies were not symbols of another man. They were the last thing life ever gave her before everything collapsed. She kept walking, pretending not to see Vance stepping toward her, with that familiar mix of arrogance and hesitation. A man used to control, suddenly unsure. "Maddie," he called. Her spine locked. She didn't turn. She couldn't. Not when her entire world, her entire secret, walked beside her holding her hands. If Vance got close, if he looked too long, if he asked the wrong question, everything she had fought to protect could unravel in seconds. And as a shadow moved behind her, she realized someone else had been watching the entire encounter. Someone who knew her name. The black SUV rolled to a smooth stop at the curb, its headlights cutting across the chaotic glow of Columbus Circle. Inside, Grant Ellison, the notoriously private real estate billionaire whose developments shaped half the Manhattan skyline, lifted his gaze from his phone. He had been reading a report about a stalled project, but something outside the window tugged his attention sharply. A woman, 2 toddlers, a man stepping out of a Maybach, looking like he'd seen a ghost. Grant narrowed his eyes. He knew that woman. He didn't know her personally, but he remembered her work. 3 years ago, during a PR disaster involving one of his luxury towers, a young strategist named Madeline Rowan salvaged the entire campaign with a last-minute presentation, one he never forgot. She had disappeared from the industry shortly after, swallowed by rumors and corporate politics. Everyone assumed she'd burned out. But tonight, she looked nothing like a woman who burned out. She looked like a woman carrying 2 worlds in her arms. "Sir, should we keep driving?" his driver asked. Grant shook his head slowly. "No. Pull over." He stepped out of the SUV, adjusting the collar of his charcoal coat as the wind whipped across the square. The minute his shoes hit the pavement, he felt the tension in the air. Thick, almost electric. Vance Callahan was striding toward Maddie, and even from a distance, Grant recognized predatory arrogance when he saw it. The twins clung tightly to Maddie's hands. The little girl stumbled when a cyclist rushed past, and Maddie knelt to steady her. Something about the protective way she held them, gentle but fierce, hit Grant harder than he expected. He walked toward them instinctively. "Maddie?" he called gently, careful not to startle her. She turned sharply, confusion flickering in her eyes before recognition dawned. "Mr. Ellison?" she breathed, stunned. "What are you doing here?" "Same question I could ask you," Grant replied with a faint, disarming smile. Before she could answer, Vance's voice sliced through the air behind them. "Maddie!" Grant's expression shifted, neutral, assessing, then quietly guarded as he stepped just half an inch closer to her. Not threatening, not possessive, just present. And Vance noticed. The billionaire CEO froze mid-stride, eyes narrowing dangerously at the sight of Grant Ellison, the one man in New York whose power could rival his own, standing protectively beside his ex-wife. "Maddie," Grant murmured quietly, "is everything all right?" But Maddie's lips parted, her breath catching, because Vance wasn't the only one watching them now. Someone else had just raised a phone and started recording. For a man who had built an empire on precision, control, and flawless public image, Vance Callahan had never felt more off balance in his life. The moment he saw Grant Ellison step toward Maddie, protective, familiar, calm, something violent twisted in his chest. A sensation he didn't recognize at first because he'd buried it years ago. Jealousy. Real, ugly, unfiltered jealousy. He took a step forward, jaw locked, his polished shoes scraping sharply against the pavement. "Maddie," he repeated, harsher this time, as if the name itself betrayed him by trembling on his tongue. Maddie flinched. Grant didn't. Grant's body angled, barely noticeable, but enough to stand between them. A gesture subtle yet infuriating. A gesture saying, "You don't get to intimidate her anymore." Vance's fists curled at his sides. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, eyes narrowing at the sight of Maddie's worn coat and diaper bag. "Why didn't you tell me you were—" He stopped himself before the word, pregnant, could escape. The children stood right there, looking at him with the kind of bewildered innocence that made something in him unravel. Noah stared openly, studying Vance's face the way children do when they instinctively recognize something familiar. Eden tugged on Maddie's sleeve, whispering, "Mommy, who is he?" The question pierced Vance straight through the ribcage. Grant crouched to help Eden pick up the toy she had dropped. "Careful, sweetheart," he said warmly. The girl smiled shyly, and that made Vance's vision flash white. "How do you know her?" Vance snapped. Grant's gaze lifted, cool and unbothered. "Professionally, years ago. She's talented. Unlike some people, I don't discard good people when they're vulnerable." A direct hit. Maddie stiffened, her breath hitching. Vance felt the sting of humiliation burn beneath his skin. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that, especially not in public, especially not by another billionaire who outranked him in both reputation and quiet influence. Phones were raised now, at least 5, maybe more. Pedestrians slowed, sensing drama. Someone whispered, "Is that Callahan? And Ellison?" Vance's instinct screamed, "Control the narrative. Control her. Control this." "Maddie," he said again, stepping closer. "We need to talk, now." Her fingers tightened around the twins' hands as if bracing for impact. Grant rose calmly. "She doesn't owe you anything." Vance's jaw twitched, his voice dropped, low and lethal. "We'll see about that." Because he had just made a decision, one that would change everything. The city noise seemed to fade into a low, trembling hum as Vance Callahan took another step toward Maddie. His breath fogged in the winter air, but his voice came out warm. Too warm, like he was rehearsing gentleness instead of feeling it. "Maddie, those children," his jaw clenched. "Are they mine?" The words didn't just cut through the night. They cracked it open. People turned. Phones lifted higher. Even Grant's eyes sharpened, assessing the danger behind Vance's sudden vulnerability. Maddie felt the twins stiffen beside her, sensing the shift. Panic rose like fire in her throat. She had feared this moment since the day she brought them home from the hospital. She never wanted the twins to become pawns in a billionaire's power struggle. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Vance stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Answer me!" It wasn't a request. It was a command, wearing the costume of concern. Grant moved subtly, just enough to place himself between Maddie and Vance. "Back off, Callahan. This isn't the place." Vance ignored him, his gaze locked on Maddie as if she were the last lifeline in a storm he created himself. "You disappeared," he said, quieter now. "No warning. No explanation. I deserved to know." Those words, "I deserved to know," nearly made Maddie laugh, bitterly, painfully. He deserved to know? He hadn't even stayed the night she learned their embryos had implanted. He had left her bleeding and alone in a hospital room. He had destroyed her career. He had erased her like an inconvenience. But now he wanted answers. The storm inside her finally broke. She straightened. "You lost the right to know anything about me the night you walked away," she said, voice steady despite the tremble in her fingers. Vance inhaled sharply, as if the truth itself had struck him. But Maddie wasn't done. "And these children," she whispered, "are mine. That's all you need to know." A murmur rippled through the watching crowd. Grant's jaw tightened in approval. Lila Crane, still sitting in the Maybach, recorded every second with wide, calculating eyes. But Vance wasn't convinced. He scanned the twins again, their features, their expressions, their familiarity. He shook his head, almost to himself. "No," he murmured. "You're lying. I can see it." He took another step. Grant's arm shot out, blocking him. That was the moment 3 police officers, alerted by the gathering crowd, approached the scene. "Is everything all right here?" one asked. Vance didn't answer, because his eyes were locked on the twins, and he had just made up his mind to get the truth at any cost. Maddie tightened her grip on the twins and forced herself to breathe. The police officers were still hovering nearby, watching the 3 adults with suspicion. Vance's expression simmered between outrage and shock. Grant stood steady as a wall of calm, and Maddie, exhausted, terrified, furious, just wanted to disappear. "Come on, babies," she murmured, ushering the twins away from the forming crowd. Grant walked beside her, subtly shielding her from the raised phones. His presence was a quiet comfort, like a coat she didn't have to ask for. But the moment they reached the curb, she could already hear whispers spreading through the crowd like wildfire. "Is that Maddie Rowan? Those kids look just like Callahan. Oh my God, someone record this!" Someone had. More than one someone. Across the street, Lila Crane stepped out of the Maybach, camera still rolling. Her smile was thin, sharp, predatory. Despite the chaos, she moved like she was walking through an editorial photo shoot, hair perfect, heels clicking against the pavement. "Perfect," she whispered into her phone. Absolutely perfect. Within minutes, before Maddie even reached the subway steps, hashtags were already climbing on social media. Callahan crosswalk. Billionaire baby. Drama. Who are the twins? Her phone buzzed once, then 10 times, then relentlessly. Maddie ignored it, focusing only on getting the twins safely underground, away from news-hungry eyes. But Grant gently touched her elbow. "You may want to check that," he said softly. "It looks serious." Maddie hesitated, then unlocked her screen and froze. The video was everywhere. Shot from 3 different angles, posted by strangers, edited by gossip accounts within seconds. It captured everything. Vance stepping out of the Maybach, shouting her name. Grant standing between them, police stepping in, and the way the twins looked up at Vance with unmistakably similar eyes. The caption on one viral post read, "Billionaire confronts ex-wife after spotting twins who look just like him." Her stomach dropped. No, Maddie whispered. No, no, no. This wasn't a quiet life in New Jersey anymore. This wasn't anonymity. This was a spotlight. Cold, blinding, merciless. Grant leaned closer. Listen, Maddie, you need help protecting yourself now. This won't stay small. She swallowed hard. I can't let Vance take anything more from me. Grant held her gaze, steady and sure. Then don't face him alone. But before she could answer, her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. Prepare yourself. He's coming for the truth. The train rattled beneath Manhattan, rocking Maddie and the twins as they rode home toward New Jersey. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, reflecting off her pale face. The children, overstimulated, confused, exhausted, leaned against her shoulders, clutching their worn, stuffed animals. Maddie kissed the tops of their heads, trying to steady her breath. But inside, panic clawed at her chest. When the train reached her stop, she hurried the twins through the cold evening air toward their tiny walk-up building. Her apartment, small, drafty, barely holding itself together, greeted her with familiar creaks. She helped the twins out of their coats, warmed milk on the stove, and tucked them into their shared toddler bed. Only when their soft breaths evened out did the silence hit. Her hands began to shake. She walked into the narrow kitchen, gripping the counter, as if the laminate edge could hold her together. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Notifications, messages, missed calls from unknown numbers. She forced herself to look. Her face, the twins' faces, Vance's face, all over the internet. Comments poured in. Are those his kids? She looks unstable. Gold digger move. She probably trapped him. The cruelty sliced deep. She had sacrificed everything, to protect her children from a man who once walked away from her in a hospital room without looking back. And now the world twisted the story into a spectacle she couldn't control. Her vision blurred. She stumbled to the couch, more springs than cushion, and curled in on herself. The weight of the day crushed her chest until she could barely breathe. She thought she was numb after all she'd survived. But she wasn't numb now. She was breaking. A sob tore loose, unexpected and raw. Then another. And another. Her shoulders shook as she buried her face in her hands. She cried for the woman she used to be, the man she used to love, the children she swore to protect. She cried until the carpet beneath her was damp and her throat burned. Why now? Why him? Why couldn't the past stay buried? A soft knock broke through her quiet despair. 3 slow taps, then a pause, then 2 more. Her breath froze. No one visited her. No one knew her address except daycare and her boss. She wiped her face with trembling hands and stepped toward the door. "Who's there?" she whispered. A familiar voice answered, calm, steady, grounding. "Maddie, it's Grant. You shouldn't be alone tonight." Maddie hesitated before opening the door, wiping the last streaks of tears from her cheeks. She cracked it an inch, just enough to see Grant Ellison standing in the dim hallway, hands in his coat pockets. Expression soft, in a way she didn't think a billionaire's face could look. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said gently. "I just wanted to see if you were okay." No one had asked her that in years. She stepped aside, letting him in. The apartment was small, too small for someone like Grant. But he didn't glance around with judgment or pity. He simply took off his gloves, placing them neatly on the counter as if he intended to stay grounded, present. "Do the kids know what's going on?" he asked quietly. "No," Maddie whispered, arms wrapped around herself. "And I can't let them. They're just babies. They don't deserve any of this." Grant nodded, the muscles in his jaw tightening. Then we're going to make sure they're protected. The word "we" threw her. She blinked. Grant, you don't owe me anything. He studied her for a long moment. That's where you're wrong. I owe you more than you know. You saved one of my biggest projects years ago. You did it without asking for credit, without demanding recognition. You showed integrity, something rare in this city. Her breath shook. She hadn't heard someone speak kindly about her work since before the divorce. And now, he continued, you're being dragged into a media storm you didn't create. You need someone with power on your side. He reached into his coat, pulling out his phone. I've already contacted my legal team. They specialize in reputation recovery and privacy protection. They'll handle Vance. They'll handle the press. Maddie felt dizzy. Grant, that's too much. I can't pay you back. He shook his head. I'm not asking for payment. I'm offering help because someone should have helped you a long time ago. Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears weren't born from fear. They were from relief, the kind that cracked something open inside her chest. Grant's voice softened even further. Tomorrow morning, I want you to come to my Manhattan office. I have a job opportunity for you. Strategic branding lead on my next national campaign. Full benefits. Flexible hours so you can be with the twins. She stared at him, stunned. Why would you do that for me? Grant held her gaze with unwavering sincerity. Because, Maddie, someone finally needs to bet on you. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. A new message from Vance. We're not done. Expect my lawyers. By the time the sun rose, the internet had turned Maddie Rowan into the centerpiece of a scandal she never asked for. Headlines spread like wildfire. Speculation, rumors, ugly comments, all fueled by one person who knew exactly how to weaponize chaos. Lila Crane. Sitting in her pristine loft near Soho, Lila scrolled through her phone with the calculated calm of a surgeon. She had spent half the night crafting stories, nudging journalists, leaking anonymous tips, and posting cryptic tweets, just vague enough to ignite a frenzy. Her manicured finger tapped the screen as she smirked. Poor Maddie, she murmured. So fragile, so unstable. Every rumor she planted carried the same venomous undertone. Maddie Rowan wasn't mentally stable after her marriage ended. A woman like that shouldn't be raising 2 children alone. The twins' paternity was questionable at best. All lies, all intentional. Because chaos made headlines, and headlines made Lila powerful. Meanwhile, Maddie sat curled on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone in disbelief. Comments flooded her notifications. She's unhinged. Those kids don't even look like each other. Classic trap the billionaire tactic. Her stomach twisted, bile rising. She wanted to scream. She wanted to defend herself. She wanted to disappear. But she couldn't. Not when 2 tiny bodies slept in the room next to hers, trusting her to keep them safe from the world. Grant, already anticipating the storm, called her at 7 a.m. sharp. Don't read anything online, he said firmly. I already did, she whispered. He sighed. Then listen carefully. This is exactly what I warned you about. Vance's team, or someone close to him, is trying to paint you unstable. That way, if this escalates legally, they can attack your credibility. Maddie squeezed her eyes shut. This isn't fair. No, Grant agreed. But I promise you, it won't last. But even Grant underestimated one thing. Lila wasn't just stirring the pot. She was strategically setting up a narrative meant to destroy Maddie before the truth could surface. And she had one final, devastating move ready. A notification popped onto Maddie's screen. A new headline. Her heart stopped as she read it. Ex-wife of tech billionaire investigated for prior mental health incident. sources claim she vanished during IVF treatment. It was a complete fabrication, but it didn't matter. It was viral. Maddie's phone buzzed again. A new message from an unknown number. This is only the beginning. Her blood ran cold because she knew exactly who sent it. Lila had declared war. Maddie sat frozen on the edge of her couch, the headline burning through her like acid. Investigated for mental health incidents, vanished during IVF. The lies were bold, cruel, deliberate. Grant arrived at her apartment within the hour, his lawyer, Ariana Pierce, beside him. Ariana was sharp, composed, and terrifying in the way only a seasoned Manhattan attorney could be. "Maddie," she said gently but firmly, "I need you to tell me exactly what happened during your IVF treatment." Maddie swallowed. Her throat felt raw. "I didn't vanish. I was alone because Vance left me mid-procedure. He told the hospital I preferred privacy. He disappeared, not me." Grant's expression darkened. Ariana nodded slowly. "We can use that." But Maddie shook her head. "No, I don't want to drag my medical history into this. I don't want the twins to grow up reading about what I went through." Ariana exchanged a glance with Grant. "Then we need something stronger, something irrefutable." Silence. And then Maddie remembered. Her hand trembled as she walked to the drawer near her bed. Beneath old insurance papers and baby socks was an envelope she had kept hidden for years. She returned to the living room and placed it carefully on the table. "It arrived after the twins were born," she whispered. Grant opened the envelope, sliding out the papers. Hospital logs, procedure timestamps, a note from the embryologist apologizing for unusual inconsistencies in the IVF cycle. Ariana's eyes widened. "Maddie, this suggests something went wrong with the lab handling your embryos." Maddie nodded. "They told me it was a clerical error. I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't want to ask questions. I just wanted to keep my babies safe." Ariana leaned forward. "Do you know who funded that clinic during your IVF year?" Maddie blinked. "No." Grant exhaled, jaw tightening. "Vance's company, Callahan Biotech. They partnered with several fertility labs as part of their expansion." The room fell silent. Ariana straightened. "Maddie, this isn't just a personal attack anymore. If the public sees this connection, it flips the narrative. You're not unstable. You're a victim of a medical mishandling linked to Vance's own corporation." Maddie's heart pounded. "But I never wanted to expose this." Ariana's voice softened. "I know, but they've left you no choice." Grant placed a reassuring hand over Maddie's. "The question is, are you ready to fight back?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed again. A legal summons. Vance was filing for emergency paternity testing. 2 days later, Manhattan felt like it was holding its breath. Reporters clustered outside the courthouse, their cameras pointed toward the heavy wooden doors where Maddie Rowan would appear for the court-ordered paternity test. She had fought it. Grant and Ariana had fought it. But Vance's lawyers were relentless, and public pressure had turned the judge cautious. Grant walked beside Maddie as they entered the building, his presence an anchor she didn't know she needed. "Whatever the results say," he murmured, "we're ready." But Maddie wasn't. How could she be? Her entire life now hinged on a test she never asked for. Inside the sterile testing room, Maddie held the twins on her lap, while a nurse swabbed their mouths. Noah clung to her neckline. Eden whimpered as the cotton brushed her cheek. Maddie kissed their foreheads, whispering, "It's okay. Mommy's here." Across the room, Vance Callahan stood rigid, arms crossed, jaw ticking. He kept staring at the children like he was memorizing every detail. The eyes, the curls, the familiar tilt of their smiles. Maddie looked away. She couldn't bear to see whatever flickered behind his expression. Guilt, panic, denial, or something worse. The nurse finally said, "Results in 48 hours." But 48 hours was all the internet needed to explode. Speculation raged, polls, hashtags, talk shows dissecting whether the twins resembled the billionaire. When the results were ready, Grant insisted she not go alone. Ariana joined them in the conference room, where a clerk handed over the sealed envelope. Maddie's hands shook as she tore it open. Her eyes darted across the page, then froze, then widened. "No," she whispered. Grant leaned in. "What does it say?" She swallowed, unable to believe the words. It wasn't one result. It was two. Noah Rowan, probability of paternity. 99.8% match to Vance Callahan. Eden Rowan, probability of paternity. 0%. Ariana inhaled sharply. A split result. This shouldn't be scientifically possible unless something went wrong in the IVF lab, Maddie finished, voice cracking. Unless the embryos were switched. Grant's expression darkened. And the clinic was funded by Callahan Biotech. The room tilted around her. This changed everything. Her innocence, her credibility, her children's future. But Vance, standing across the table, misread her shock. He smirked, a cold, triumphant smirk. "So," he said quietly, "you were cheating after all." Maddie's breath stopped, because the real storm wasn't the DNA. It was the lie he was about to unleash next. The conference room fell into a stunned, suffocating silence. The DNA papers trembled in Maddie's hands, her pulse pounding at her temples like a warning bell. One child his, one child not. A reality she still couldn't comprehend, because she knew what the world would assume. And Vance seized it instantly. He leaned back in his chair, arrogance dripping from every controlled movement, and spoke as if delivering a press statement rather than detonating her life. "Well," he murmured, loud enough for the clerk to hear, "I always suspected she wasn't faithful." Grant stood so abruptly his chair scraped the floor. Enough. But Vance kept going, his voice smooth, calculated, already crafting the narrative he wanted America to believe. "She disappeared during IVF," he said with a shrug. "Clearly she had someone else lined up. Maybe she knew the procedure wouldn't work and decided to guarantee a pregnancy." Maddie's breath shattered. "That is a lie, and you know it." Vance tilted his head, feigning sympathy. "Is it?" "Because the numbers don't lie, Maddie. One child is mine, the other isn't. And there are only a few explanations for that." Ariana slammed a hand on the table. "There's a fourth explanation. Clinical negligence. The IVF logs already show discrepancies, and your corporation's involvement makes this look like an institutional cover-up." Vance's expression hardened. "Watch yourself." "Oh, I'm just getting started," Ariana replied. But the damage was done. Within an hour, Lila had already pushed the cheating ex-wife angle to half the media outlets in New York. Maddie couldn't escape it. Notifications exploding on her phone, vicious comments questioning her character, talk show hosts speculating about hidden lovers. Grant tried to take the phone from her. "Don't read it, Maddie." But she already had. Her reputation, already cracked, now shattered completely, weaponized by the man who once held her, while she sobbed through hormone injections and whispered promises of a family. Maddie pressed a shaking hand to her stomach, nausea rising. "People think I betrayed him," she whispered. "I didn't. I would never." Grant stepped close, steadying her. "And we will prove it." But Vance wasn't finished. He turned to the judge's clerk, voice smooth as ice. "I'll be filing for temporary custody of Noah. Clearly, the environment she's raising them in is unstable." Maddie froze, blood draining from her face. You can't," she breathed. Vance looked directly into her eyes, cold and triumphant. "Watch me." The room spun, because in that moment Maddie realized Vance didn't just want the truth, he wanted her destroyed. Maddie could barely feel her legs as she left the courthouse with Grant and Ariana. The cold wind whipped around her, but it was nothing compared to the chill spreading across her ribs. Temporary custody. Those two words echoed in her skull like a verdict from a world determined to punish her. Grant kept pace beside her, matching every shaky step. "Listen to me, Maddie," he said softly. "Vance doesn't get to decide how this ends. Not while I'm here." She wanted to believe him, but fear had already sunk its claws deep. They reached his car, a sleek black Mercedes S-Class, and Grant opened the back door for her. "Sit. Breathe. I'm taking you to my office." "I don't want to drag you into this," she whispered. He shook his head. "Too late. I stepped in the moment I saw you crossing that street." The memory hit her. A chaotic night. Headlights. Twins clutching her hands, and Grant emerging from his SUV like a guardian she never knew she'd need. Inside the warmth of the car, Ariana turned to face Maddie. "This isn't over. The split paternity result is complicated, yes, but it also gives us leverage. The IVF mishandling makes your case stronger, not weaker." "But the media," Maddie began. Grant cut in. "Is irrelevant until we control the narrative." Ariana nodded. "And we will. Starting today." As the car glided through Manhattan traffic, Grant unlocked his iPad and swiped open a folder. "I need you to see something." He handed it to Maddie. Her breath caught. It was an offer letter for a senior branding position at Ellison Global, with a salary she hadn't seen since before her world collapsed. Flexible hours, on-site childcare, full legal and media support. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Grant's gaze softened. "Because you deserve to stand on your feet again. Not just survive. Rise." Tears stung her eyes. For the first time in years, someone believed she deserved a future. But the moment almost shattered as Ariana's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression darkened instantly. "What is it?" Maddie asked, heart thudding. Ariana hesitated. "Vance just contacted the press. He's giving a live statement. He's going to frame today's results as proof of your infidelity." Maddie's stomach plunged. "No," she whispered. "He wouldn't." Grant's jaw flexed. "Oh, he would. And he is." Then Ariana added the part that turned Maddie's blood to ice. "He's doing it while holding Noah in his arms." The night of the Metropolitan Charity Gala arrived far sooner than Maddie wished. Grant had insisted she attend, not for publicity, but to reclaim her dignity in a room full of powerful people who assumed they already knew her story. Maddie hesitated until the twins, blissfully unaware, cheered when she tried on a simple navy dress Grant's assistant had quietly delivered. "You look like a princess, Mommy," Eden whispered. For them, she went. Manhattan glittered under a velvet sky as Grant's limousine pulled up to the Met steps. Flashbulbs exploded instantly when Grant stepped out, offering his hand to help Maddie exit. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Who is she? Is that the woman from the Callahan scandal? She's with Ellison now?" Grant leaned close. "Ignore them. You walk with me." Inside, chandeliers cascaded light across marble floors, and the air buzzed with wealth, whispers, and tension. Maddie held her chin high, though her heart thudded painfully. She could feel eyes dissecting her. She could feel judgment trailing her gown like a shadow. Then the atmosphere shifted. The crowd parted as Vance Callahan entered, polished, smug, and performing fatherhood like it was a scripted role. He didn't bring Noah, but he didn't need to. His PR team surrounded him like armor, and at his side, wearing a glittering gold dress like a warning flare, was Lila Crane. Lila's smile sharpened when she spotted Maddie. "Well," she purred, "if it isn't our little disappearing act." Grant stepped forward, voice cool as steel. "Lila, if you don't step back, I'll make sure every outlet sees the metadata on your leaked stories." Her smile faltered, but only slightly. Vance approached Maddie directly, his voice dripping with orchestrated sympathy. "You know, Maddie, you could fix all of this. Just admit what you did. Say Eden isn't mine because you were unfaithful. The public might forgive a confession." Maddie's breath caught. Grant's jaw clenched, but Vance wasn't done. He lowered his voice. "Drop your fight for Noah. I'll make the custody process painless. You can keep the other child." Maddie stared at him, horror rising like bile. "You're talking about my children like they're negotiable assets." "They're mine to protect," Vance replied. "At least, the one who's actually mine." Maddie's hands shook, fury built in her chest, not the frantic kind, but a cold, focused fire she'd never felt before. She stepped forward, voice steady. "You're not destroying me. Not again." Vance smirked. "We'll see." But suddenly, the giant projector screen behind them flickered to life. A new report, a new whistleblower, and one name flashed across the screen in bold letters: Callahan Biotech, under federal investigation. Gasps rippled through the gala like a shockwave. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Champagne glasses stopped halfway to lips. Dozens of eyes lifted toward the massive projector as the headline blazed across it in unforgiving white letters. Callahan Biotech, under federal investigation. Whistleblower claims fertility lab, mishandled embryos. Maddie's breath vanished. Grant's hand tightened around the stem of his glass. But Vance went utterly still. For the first time since the crosswalk, the mask slipped. Lila blinked rapidly, her painted smile cracking. "Vance, did you know about this?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the report continued, page after page, exposing details the public had never seen. Unlogged embryo transfers. Misfiled patient samples. Corporate funding from Callahan Biotech linked to irregular lab practices. A whistleblower's testimony stating embryos were mixed without proper chain of custody. A video clip played next, an anonymous silhouette speaking with distorted voice. "We warned them, but the corporation insisted on pushing procedures faster to meet quarterly goals." Another slide flickered onto the screen. Date of incident. Same week Madeline Rowan underwent IVF. A murmur erupted. Someone said aloud, "Oh my God, she didn't cheat. The clinic messed up." Another voice, "This could ruin Callahan." A third, "This explains the twins." Maddie felt her knees weaken, not with fear, but with the dizzy shock of vindication she never expected to come so publicly. Grant steadied her with a hand at her back, his voice low. "It's turning. Stay calm." But Vance surged forward, shouting, "Turn that off. This is confidential." "This is fabricated! Do you hear me? Fabricated!" No one listened. If anything, cameras turned toward him faster. Lila stepped away, sensing her brand collapsing beside his. "Vance, maybe we should—" "Shut up!" he hissed, completely losing the charm he wore like designer cologne. Grant's voice cut through the chaos, cool and authoritative. "This is a federal investigation, Vance. You don't get to bury this one." Vance spun toward him, face flushed. "You did this. You and her. You're trying to destroy me." Grant didn't blink. "You did this to yourself." Maddie lifted her chin. Her voice, quiet but resolute, reached him. "You accused me. Humiliated me. Tried to take my son. All while knowing something was wrong with that clinic." Her words carried across the marble hall, landing like stones. Vance's mouth opened, but no excuses came. Because everyone now saw him for what he was. Then a final alert flashed on the projector. Federal agents en route to Callahan Biotech for immediate seizure of records. The room gasped, and Vance turned pale, because he knew what those records would reveal next. The gala had already descended into chaos, but the moment the alert about federal agents hit the screen, everything shifted. It wasn't whispers anymore. It was uproar. Reporters pushed past donors. Board members scrambled for exits. Investors began dialing their attorneys right there in the ballroom. Vance Callahan stood frozen in the center of it all, like the eye of a hurricane that had finally turned inward. For the first time in his life, he looked small. Grant moved subtly in front of Maddie, shielding her from the aggressive cameras as they swarmed. "Stay behind me," he murmured. "You're not facing this storm alone." But Vance couldn't tear his eyes away from her. "You planned this," he spat, pointing at Maddie with a shaking hand. "You? And your new billionaire boyfriend." Grant's jaw tightened. "Careful, Callahan. Your panic is showing." Vance lunged toward them, but security intercepted him with swift, practiced efficiency. He struggled against their grip, shouting, "She lied! She cheated! She did this to ruin me!" No one believed him anymore. The room had shifted sides. As photographers snapped away, Maddie finally stepped forward, steady, composed, unbroken. "All I ever wanted was to raise my children in peace," she said quietly. "But you kept coming after us. You pushed this." Her voice wasn't loud, but the ballroom fell silent. "You tried to take my son," she whispered. "And you tried to destroy my reputation to do it." Vance flinched as if the words physically struck him. Grant rested a reassuring hand on her back, but he didn't interfere. This was hers to say. "You accused me of infidelity," Maddie continued, eyes burning. "But the truth is, your company's negligence created this nightmare, and you hid it. You hid it because you cared more about your image than my life or the lives of our children." Gasps echoed around the room. Lila, trying to edge away unnoticed, was spotted by a reporter. Microphones swung toward her, and someone shouted, "Is it true you leaked fabricated stories about Maddie? Did Callahan tell you to?" Lila froze, caught, cornered, exposed. Vance's head whipped toward her. "Don't say a word." But it was too late. The projector flashed again, this time with a new breaking bulletin. Callahan Biotech Board considers immediate removal of CEO pending federal investigation. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Callahan, are you resigning?" Vance's face drained of color. Grant leaned down, murmuring to Maddie, "His empire is collapsing." But before she could respond, a federal agent stepped into the ballroom, badge raised. "Vance Callahan," he announced, "we need you to come with us." The room erupted, and Maddie realized this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of justice. The next week unfolded like a slow-motion disaster for Vance Callahan, one he could neither spin nor escape. Federal agents combed through every office of Callahan Biotech, seizing hard drives, interviewing employees, exposing emails he thought would stay buried forever. By Tuesday, the shareholders called an emergency board meeting. By Wednesday, leaks confirmed he'd been stripped of all decision-making power. By Thursday morning, the company's stock plunged 48%. And by Friday, the world he built was rubble. Vance stood alone inside his penthouse, once his throne, now a mausoleum of everything he'd lost. His reflection stared back at him from the glass windows, hollow eyes, disheveled hair, a man unrecognizable. He threw a crystal tumbler against the wall. It shattered like the last illusion of control. "You ruined me," he muttered into the empty room, imagining Maddie's face. "You took everything. But deep inside, beneath the rage, beneath the denial, was fear. Fear that the truth was never on his side. Fear that Maddie had finally escaped his shadow. Fear that the world now saw what she had endured. Down in the lobby, a different scene unfolded. Maddie arrived with Grant and Ariana for her custody hearing. She held Eden on her hip, while Noah clung to her coat. The courthouse buzzed with reporters, but unlike before, their tone had changed. "Miss Rowan, do you feel vindicated? Do you believe Callahan Biotech is responsible for the IVF errors? How does it feel to have the truth coming out?" Grant positioned himself beside her, a steady and unmistakable presence of support. Maddie didn't answer the questions. She simply pressed a kiss to Noah's hair and kept walking. Inside the courtroom, Vance arrived late. He looked smaller, haunted. Gone was the polished predator. In his place stood a man unraveling. When the judge entered, the tension thickened. Ariana spoke first, laying out the newly uncovered evidence, the tampered lab reports, the whistleblower's testimony, the timestamps proving Maddie never vanished, the direct funding link to Vance's company. Each piece struck Vance like a blow. Then Ariana presented the final document, a medical ethics review confirming the embryo mismatch was due to clinic negligence, not infidelity. The courtroom gasped. Maddie didn't look at Vance. She didn't need to. The judge adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Callahan, based on the evidence and the instability demonstrated during this investigation, your request for custody is denied." Vance's head dropped. "And furthermore," the judge continued, "temporary sole custody is granted to Ms. Rowan." Grant exhaled softly beside Maddie. Noah squeezed her hand. Eden giggled without understanding the victory around her. But before Maddie could breathe, her lawyer leaned in, whispering, "Brace yourself. Vance is about to make this worse." The courtroom emptied slowly, but Vance Callahan remained seated long after the judge's gavel had fallen. His hands trembled against the table, knuckles white, jaw clenched. The world he once ruled now rejected him outright. Every headline, every leak, every truth he tried to suppress had risen to destroy him. All while the woman he underestimated stood taller than he'd ever seen her. Maddie didn't look back at him as she carried the twins out of the courtroom. She didn't need to. His downfall was no longer her burden to witness. Outside, the winter sun broke through the clouds, brushing gold across her face. Eden squealed at the warmth, and Noah wrapped his arms around her neck. Grant walked beside them. Quiet but present, radiating the kind of steady loyalty Maddie once believed didn't exist. Ariana approached with a small smile. "It's over. He can't touch you or the kids, and the federal investigation will keep him tied up for years." Maddie exhaled. A long, trembling breath she felt like she'd been holding for 3 years. "Thank you," she whispered. Grant tilted his head. "You did this, Maddie. You fought for yourself. For them. I just stood beside you." But he hadn't just stood beside her. He shielded her, believed her, restored her. A few hours later, Maddie found herself standing on the balcony of Grant's Manhattan office, a stunning view overlooking Central Park. The twins napped inside on a plush sofa, exhausted from the day. Maddie let the cold air fill her lungs as she processed the impossible. She was free. Grant joined her quietly, offering a warm cup of coffee. She accepted it with both hands, savoring the simple comfort. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Grant gazed at her, not with pity, not with obligation, but with admiration. "Now," he said, "you start the life you always deserved, with your career restored, with your children safe, and—" his voice dipped, gentle yet certain, "with someone who cares for you, deeply. Only if you want that. Her heart fluttered, uncertain, hopeful, alive. You mean you, she whispered. He smiled. I've meant you since the moment I saw you crossing that street. Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain this time, but from a release so profound it felt like sunlight breaking open a long winter. She stepped closer. Then yes, she breathed. I want that. Grant cupped her cheek. And for the first time in years, Maddie let herself lean into someone, without fear, without doubt. Below them, the city moved on. Above them, the sky cleared. Behind her, the past finally closed. Before her, a future she thought she'd never get to have. Maddie had won. Completely. All right. So the story has finally come to an end. And if you, my wonderful friend, are still here with me right now, then something in Maddie's journey must have touched your heart in a very real way. Maybe it reminded you of a moment when life knocked you down, or a moment when you didn't think you could rise again. But you did. And that's exactly the truth this story hopes to leave behind. Your past doesn't get to decide your future. Your choices do. The Stoics used to say, "The obstacle is the way." Marcus Aurelius reminded us that the things meant to break us often become the very things that build us. Maddie didn't win because life was fair. She won because she refused to let cruelty define her. She protected her children, rebuilt her dignity, and opened her heart again, proving that healing isn't a miracle. It's a decision we make every day. So as you go back to your own life, hold this close. You are stronger than what tried to hurt you. You are worth more than what tried to diminish you. And if this story moved you even a little, show it some love. Hit like, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their strength, and don't forget to subscribe so we can keep walking through these powerful stories together. You're not alone. I see you, and I'm grateful you're here. This story is a work of fiction created solely for entertainment and emotional reflection. All characters, events, companies, and situations in the narrative are fabricated and not based on real individuals or real organizations. Any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, or to real-life events is purely coincidental. The purpose of this content is to explore themes of resilience, healing, and personal empowerment through a dramatic, imaginative narrative. It is not intended to depict factual scenarios, real legal cases, or actual corporate practices. Viewers should enjoy the story as a creative interpretation, not as a representation of real-world events. We encourage audiences to approach the content with an open mind and understand that its primary goal is storytelling, reflection, and inspiration.